everybody. It's Patrick Ascolis with another Banyan Technologies Tire Tracks podcast. I am joined, I believe, for the third time, and she must be a glutton for punishment, Anne Reinke, now with the Intermodal Association of North America, or as you said, how you could actually
IANA.
IANA. That's right. I like you were saying before. How do you connect that?
I am Anne.
I love it. No, and thank you so much for being with me today. Now, last time we spoke, I believe the last two times you were with TIA, and I'm going to start there. Other than give me 3 bullet points on if someone doesn't know you from Adam, who you are and what you do, and then why the shift from TIA to IANA, and what's IANA doing?
Sure. So I'm from the Washington, D.C. area, and I started out as a lawyer, and you could just throw a nickel out the window of a downtown office building and you'd hit 10 lawyers. So I didn't love what I was doing as a lawyer. I really liked advocacy, which is what law is in a different shape. So I got into lobbying, and why the transportation industry? Really no reason. I found a job with the high-speed ground transportation people. They thought I was an expert because I was a lawyer.
You became one, right? Yeah.
Right. But I wasn't. But from there, I really got into the railroad industry. So I was at AAR, which is the Association of American Railroads, and CSX. I took a diversion for the U.S. government, U.S. DOT, for 18 months. So that was fascinating. And then I realized I'm not a government gal. And so I went to the Transportation Intermediaries Association. I was there for 4 years. It was a fabulous experience, just learning about the 3PL industry and how important they are to the whole supply chain. IANA came calling. I wasn't really, I certainly wasn't looking for a job. They came calling. I thought, well, I'll just interview. What the heck? But by the time we got through the process, I don't know what they did. They had some kind of voodoo magic, and they persuaded me to leave the TIA. So here I am. And the IANA represents all those folks who touch a container. So, and I know we're going to talk about drayage, but if you think about the life cycle of the container from the manufacturer to the receiver, it's everyone who touches that container along the way. So the ocean vessels, the dray carriers, the port terminals, then the railroads, and then of course the suppliers and the manufacturers.
Now, and thank you for that. Now, I have a question. As someone coming into IANA at the level of CEO and president that you're coming into, what are your goals? What do they want different with you at the helm than what they were doing previously? Because obviously, it sounds like they came to you looking at where this would be a fit, and why are you in a position to take to where they want to go or where it needs to be?
Well, I had the luxury of having my predecessor be here for 27 years, building an incredibly robust organization that really built IANA into what it is, which is a powerful tool if you are in the intermodal industry to get to know people. There's a committee structure, so you get to know the issues and you can coalesce around what those issues are that can help you, et cetera. But they really wanted me because I have a government background and I was in government affairs for a long time. So I have a lot of external relationships. They sort of want to do IANA on steroids. They want more people to know about who we are. And as a consequence, grow the intermodal market share. So we're about 5%. And it's been that way for, ups and downs of 1 or 2% along the way. But we really want to take a hold of a larger piece of that freight market share. And really the way to do it is by advocating on Capitol Hill, by going through a PR campaign, by embracing and growing our educational efforts. So that's why they put me here.
Now, when you say the greater market share, is this just going to people and say, "Hey, have you thought about putting your stuff in a container lately?" You talked about a PR campaign. It's not like containers is some new technology. Nobody last year just said, "I came up with a new way to make a giant rectangle box, and you guys are going to have your minds blown." Why now? Why is it something to pursue, and why should someone that is doing an alternative mode movement be looking into that?
Yeah. So what's the imperative? I think the imperative is that there is a lot of consumer goods that come into the United States, not as many from China lately, and we can get into that.
Yeah,
But
we won't touch the big T word right now.
oh, yeah. But there are a lot of consumer goods, and the intermodal sort of share of the freight business has gone up. When I say intermodal share of the business, meaning like if you're a railroad, you used to be a lot of boxcar movements, a lot of
Okay.
coal, a lot, and they still do that. But as you know, coal has gone down. We're not, it's 26% of their market share now. It used to be much,
Hmm.
much more than that. And so they're relying more on intermodal traffic. And so if you think about that being the future, because we're turned sort of into a service economy from
Right.
from a manufacturing economy. Again, not if the president has his way, but we don't want to talk about that.
No,
But
and I don't think that's an argument you have to have. I think
right.
overall, post World War II, we started rotating into service over manufacturing. Not to say that we don't do those parts, but from a big picture standpoint, we're
Right.
much more of a distributor service piece.
And so that's exactly right. And so how can we harness that if we know that's the future and we know we can have a really good product that can be truck like? We just need to convert those folks who think of truck only um, first. And so it's not like we're trying to compete necessarily and eradicate the truck market, because the marketplace of trucking, that's 80% of the freight marketplace, right? Like
Yeah.
they do a fabulous job. But there's plenty of traffic out there,
I,
and
I was gonna say there's no shortage of
exactly.
demand.
Exactly. And we know this, that trucks do a fabulous job at a certain 100 to 500 miles.
Yeah.
Railroads do better beyond that, and dray fills the sort of last mile piece of it all. So I think that there's plenty of room for all of us to be part of it.
And when you say that, it's moving away from coal, what other big pieces were trains moving around, if not containers? And this is from a layperson that when I get held up by the railroad, I see a lot of the box cars and the containers on there. Where was that historically, other than coal? Was it livestock, or what was it if not containers? What's filling those box cars?
Yeah, so
Or that
I
maybe isn't filling those box cars now that used
right.
to?
Well, so the railroads are a common carrier, so I think the only thing they can say no to are circus trains. So anyway, that's just a little yeah, that's just a little piece of history. But um
But if it wasn't a circus train, if it was made like a cow livestock and you just put your zebras and lions in
oh
there,
my
then what, right?
gosh, that
It's
would be
just
like
it's
a
just a
child.
question of packaging.
It's right. That's like a child's nighttime storybook. But yeah,
Yes.
I mean, it's like stone stand and gravel. It's
Okay.
all the awful noxious
Mm,
chemicals that we need, but we wish we didn't, right?
yep.
It's scrap metal, municipal solid waste, for example. I mean, you know, trucks can take some of that, but it would be in such an enormous volume that it's really far better to ship that all by rail. And also, typically, highway accidents are far more frequent than
Yeah.
derailments, although it doesn't necessarily seem that way.
No. Well, I mean, you get a bigger story out of one versus the other, but it
Exactly.
sounds like it's very much the unseen necessities that are kind of getting moved that you don't think about unless you're directly in that business,
100%.
or you need to get it moved and someone says we don't want this here tomorrow, or
Yeah.
we need it somewhere else. So why should somebody, what are some of the reasons, what's some of the pain that the INA, the IANA is within the intermodal and the drayage is taking away or can alleviate versus somebody that's not using that mode today?
Yeah. So in essence, you're using each mode at its optimal level.
Okay.
So
So it's not about picking one and just going with that all the time.
no, exactly. So for example, ocean vessels, you're not, I've just been
We're,
reading
we did we
more.
didn't make it. We didn't make a new bridge for with a train coming
Yeah.
over the sea to compete with the ships yet.
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever heard of this book. It's called The Box.
Okay.
And it's about the container industry, and I'm listening to it. And so I'm learning so much. But yeah, first of all, there's not a bridge. But second of all, the containers are different than those that travel on airlines. It's very expensive to travel cargo freight,
Mm-hmm.
as you know. And so the vast majority of the freight, if it's coming from overseas, comes on these ocean going vessels. So they do an enormously beneficial job for us because it's sort of low margin business that takes a little bit of a time, but you can get a large outlay of goods
Right.
on those ships. Then you get that offloaded at the port, and you got your little dray guy who can get it to, maybe it's a warehouse, maybe it's an intermodal facility, wherever it has to be. But that's probably the most nimble way to do it, right? Having a dray
Right.
carrier who can offload it and take it where it needs to go. And then you take it to the railroad, and then they're shipping it. Let's say the goods are coming into the port of LA Long Beach, and it has to
Hmm.
go to, obviously, the vast majority of goods do come in through there, a large port of, for now, consumer goods do. So then they have to take it, to points east, and that's really the railroad's job. So you're using it in a seamless way where everyone's talking to each other. And if you're like my old industry, a 3PL or intermodal marketing company, you're
Yeah.
creating a product for your customer where they don't need to know about all those interchanges. They just need to know that this is a seamless operation where everyone's used in their most optimal way.
And no, and a great point there is that why and how at the end of the day for most customers, did it get there on time? Did it get there undamaged and get there for the same price that I was quoted at? But what is happening now if I'm not doing that? What am I doing basically if I'm not taking advantage of that drayage? Am I waiting for a stevedore to load it up on the back of my truck? I know that port congestion was a giant issue during COVID, but as someone that's not driving up to the port right now, has that diminished? Are we running into new chokeholds from that same type of position? And how does getting it on the train as fast as possible versus maybe putting it onto the truck and the highway alleviate any of that?
Yeah, I mean, I just listened to a guy from Ports America who said ports cannot be used as storage facilities. So if there's too much traffic coming in at once, now here, that there's probably a lot of traffic, a lot of containers coming in to avoid tariffs, right? Because although the Chinese ones are imposed, the other,
Everything's kind of grandfathered right now if it's
yes,
already in motion.
yes,
Yeah. Okay.
exactly. And so,
Like the iPhones all being smuggled across whatever airplanes are still coming across. That's right.
yeah, thank God for my iPhone.
Android for life.
Yeah, exactly, whatever, but yes, and so they have these cranes that take the containers off the boats and put them onto trucks, right?
Hmm.
To some extent, these could be the trucks that then take you where it needs to go, or it takes you to the dray, takes you to the warehouse. It just sort of depends. It really depends on what the shipper wants to do. So
Okay.
again, you think about the intermodal marketing companies who's selling this service, they're positioning their ability to say, here's what the rates are for this, here's the rates are for this move, here, you choose it. And what we found is we did a little bit of analysis that there are folks who don't understand intermodal because it is multimodal, and so they
Right.
don't necessarily understand how that's better, because it seems like more handoffs means more problems. And what we say is, typically this happens so frequently, and we already have an overarching agreement for how the equipment is interchanged. It's called the
Okay.
IIA, and people who are in the intermodal industry know how to interchange the equipment. So it is seamless. It's just a question of whether or not you're going to do it. And we can convert, have converts who've used it. I mean, it's sort of like if you have a negative experience with, going to the Apple store, since you're an Android for life guy, you're like, I'm never buying an Apple again. Well, sometimes,
It was more about the right click, but they brought that around eventually. But no, I hear you completely. Yeah, you're going to the Apple store and you can't stand it. Keep
you
going.
can't stand it, so you're gone. So we're trying to ensure that if they had one experience with intermodal, that doesn't mean that that's what intermodal is. You can
Right.
have a negative experience with a truck too, right? So
Oh
the,
yeah.
that's sort of our PR campaign, is really high level. Here's what we are, and here's the benefit. Besides sustainability and getting trucks off the highways that don't need to be on these sort of longer distances.
Yeah, and I think you bring up. I got two great points from that. So you bring up sustainability, and one of the things that always blew my mind, just because maybe it's the old images of the trains just blowing smoke and soot everywhere, but then in fact it's a greener way to get things across. How much so, and is that something that's going to increase with more usage, or kind of flatlines at where not flatline, but flattens out from a sustainability thing? And as you're talking about from a PR, who is your ideal celebrity that you want for this? I mean, is it Shaq with a conductor hat on, like all aboard the diesel train? Like what's your
Yeah.
image if you've got unlimited budget? I want to know that because that just sounds fun.
That's hilarious. I have to think about that. I'm going to think about it while I'm answering your
Fair.
first question. Yeah. Well, yeah. So when I was working in the railroad industry, they would tout that they got 436 miles per gallon, right?
Yeah.
Which is a pretty good. It's pretty good. Stat to show this is how.
I'd still be on probably the first or second tank in one of these cars,
Well, exactly right. So that shows your sustainability. You know, over time, I think I hate to denigrate a state like California, but California obviously wants to have these zero emission locomotives long term. There is no technology currently that allows for that. Does
Okay.
that mean that that will never be? As any of these sort of technology upgrades occur, it's typically happens because of the marketplace, not because of government fiat. Government does not
Right.
do a good job of picking winners and losers, as you know. They do a terrible job. And so if that happens, if the technology shows its ROI, then sure, I could see that going there, but we're not there yet.
Right. The competing technology hasn't been brought up and been cheap enough or been effective enough for someone to go, oh, hey, I want to modify this train that I already have moving with a completely different engine or track set, whatever that technology gap might be.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you know this about EV trucks, which they're also pushing for in California. The battery has to be enormous if you're
Right.
actually going to have any kind of range. And then charging it takes so long. And so let's just think about the practicalities of cargo movement in that
Hmm.
state. It doesn't make sense. And until it makes sense, you know, we
Right.
should
It's a prototype kind of pilot experiment until it makes sense. Yeah. No, and that makes a lot of sense. And talking about the EV California and equipment there, what kind of benefits do I have as a 3PL, a carrier, even as a customer by starting to utilize drayage and intermodal where I might not have? Is it, as we talked about EV, and you and I have talked about California in the past on mandating newer, less emission trucks and everything like that. Is that starting to hit the marketplace, and we're not seeing enough trucks to hit the demand because there is now restrictions on what can move things that intermodal doesn't deal with?
Yeah, I mean, California is such a special state in many, many ways. It's the top cargo theft state, so congratulations to them
Do
for.
they also have do they also have the top cargo though? Like, is it one of those things?
Well, yeah, I mean, they still have a lot of freight movement. However, and this is really um, less about sort of mobility than anything else. But this directly affects our dray members. Is they also love this notion that these poor dear truck drivers don't know what's good for them and they really are an employee. They're not an independent contractor. They think they are, they think they're running their own business, but truly they're being exploited by the big bad whomever,
Hmm.
broker, I don't know
Right.
who else, right?
Right. Exactly.
And that is a huge deterrent. If you think the vast majority of our dray carriers are independent operators who are not unionized, and
Mm.
so that's also been a struggle in California because the Teamsters don't like that. They do not like that these guys are not unionized, that they are their own independent entities. That is it has a chilling effect on those who want to do business in California. And we're
Mm.
already seeing people, and maybe it's more anecdotal than anything, but we're seeing people who say, I don't want to do business in California. I don't want to run a business in California. And so they're moving to Arizona or what have you.
And to that point, I and this is from ignorance. I apologize. Are there opportunities at ports on that coast that aren't California? Like you say, moving to Arizona, are you still have to grab your stuff from the port of Los Angeles and get it out as quickly as possible, or are people starting to look at alternative ports within that?
Yeah, I mean it's tough because as I mentioned at the outset, a lot of volume comes in through the port of LA Long Beach and they do
Yeah.
a fabulous job. It is not, they're not getting in the middle of this fight. They're just trying to run an efficient
They're
port,
just
right?
trying to unload, load, and get to the next boat. Yeah.
Exactly right. But, you think about the creative things that are being done to avoid some of that. And maybe it's also congestion, it's also a little NIMBYism, it's also to get out of the political spotlight. But for example, one of our members, BNSF, they have developed this huge intermodal facility in Barstow, California. And
Okay.
it's, a short enough distance that you can get, today, what came into the port today, but you avoid all the kind of machinations of trying to figure out if people, to grow sort of their presence, because that was a huge issue for them. I do think that Arizona is becoming, and Utah is also becoming far more savvy about intermodal. And in fact, both, I know for sure Utah is developing an inland port facility.
Ooh,
So I do think that that is saying we see what the competitive landscape is here. We see a vulnerability and we want
yeah.
to exploit it.
So, and just to tangent for a second, when you say something like an inland port, it sounds like an oxymoron, like, thundering silence or sometimes military intelligence. But within that, does that just mean it comes off the port, nobody touches it, and it gets hauled here without it being separated? How do you have an inland port?
Yeah, I mean, typically it's if there's a direct move from,
Okay.
it's almost like a yard, right? It's
Okay.
almost like an intermodal yard where you'll have you won't have the ocean vessel coming in, but you'll have the railroad who would have deposited and picked up by truck, basically.
For some reason, I imagine them putting a lot of water bodies around it just to really sell the idea. No, but so
Creating
get,
a canal.
yeah, just yeah, a moat even, just getting back to some reality here for a second. So within this and with IANA, with all these different moves and different modes, and one of the things that I know from a very personal side at Banyan here, how does something like visibility and tracking get done if I'm going to, three or four different modes and three or four different, say that I'm not going through a 3PL and I'm one of those savvy customers that's calling up and I know this guy's going to drop it off to this guy and this truck's going to get it to that train, et cetera, et cetera. Aren't there some problems there, or are there ways that that's alleviated? And what do you have to say to someone that says, almost that thing of there's going to be touched by five different hands. If I'm not worried about it not going bad from my equipment's getting busted and it's getting there on time, how do I track it if it's
Yeah,
all going through all these different routes?
you're making such a great point, because I think that's the utility of having a visibility platform, having transportation management systems, of which you're very familiar there at Banyan. If they have integrations into those modes, then that becomes your kind of go-to, all, seeing eye dog, if you will.
Yeah.
And that's the issue too, is trying to make sure they do all integrate together. We're talking about technology and modes that have been around for over 100 years, right?
I was just gonna ask, does the steam locomotive have Wi-Fi on it? I know it's not steam anymore. I
Not
know,
Steve
but
anymore.
yeah.
Yeah, but I do think they do all now embrace the notion of having a visibility platform. The question is, because of their, along, I guess it's like having something around for as long as it is. You're like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Why would I want to integrate? Why would I want to integrate with others? Why do I need to let them see what I have, where I am, what I'm doing, et cetera? I think they're beginning to see that there are advantages with that integration. So we already know, many of our steamship companies, our ocean vessels, they have what are called smart containers that have GPS already on them, so they can track the container from where it's on the ship to when it's on the dray to when it's on the railroad. And
And
so
that makes so much sense because
it
then it doesn't
makes
matter
so much
how it's moving, wherever it is, you're
exactly.
pinging it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so for visibility's sake, the more that can be integrated into the smart container from BNSF, for example, or CSX to Hapag Lloyd or whatever, who has one of the smart containers,
Hmm.
that is not only beneficial from a customer perspective, from the end user and the manufacturer who produced, and the beneficial cargo owner, but it also has um, advantages for the dray guy who's waiting for the container, for example. If you're waiting for a handoff and you don't know when it's coming, that means that leads to sort of detention and demurrage and waiting around for, and paying
Hmm.
overtime and all that kind of stuff. And so it's got a labor advantage, it's got a customer advantage, and I say the last thing it has is a cargo security advantage, meaning if you know where your container is, it's far less likely that it will get stolen without you knowing or being able to do something to prevent it.
Yeah, and to that point, we briefly talked about cargo theft in California and it being stolen. Does within I'll go to the train here on the tracks. Is there a plus or minus of where theft happens? Is it easier? Is it harder because you've got this giant? Are people getting on horses and going cowboys and Indians with the bandana over and jumping on, and then what is it? Detaching, the one they want, like what's going on out there? And is it just no one messes with trains, or is it a lot harder to because of a reason I'm not aware of? Because like you said, and like a lot of people that I've talked to on here, the logistics industry, we're seeing a lot of freight, whether it's fraud, whether it's theft, whether it's at the front end, whether it's while it's moving, or it just, it got moved to somewhere it wasn't supposed to. And now someone's got a container or a truck full of your stuff and you don't know where it is. How does that differ from trucking, whether it's LTL or full truckload, over on the intermodal side, if at
Yeah,
all?
you're exactly right. And we actually had a discussion about this, a roundtable the House Railroad Subcommittee convened yesterday. And what's interesting is on the trucking side, there is straight theft, straight out cargo theft, right? But as you
Mm-hmm.
know, there's a far more influence of fraud. And that's because you
Mm-hmm.
have a really diffuse industry. There are so many players in the trucking space who, are spoofing and phishing and all that kind of thing. And
It's not strange to have not heard about them because
yes,
they might operate in one lane, or they just came on and
exactly.
they're going under bid because they want to get the market share themselves. So it's not a crazy idea if it's not one of these big three or four names.
Right, and as you know, the sort of entrance fee, the registration of many of these businesses is incredibly low hurdle.
Right.
And I know FMCSA, which is the governing entity, is trying to make that harder and actually check credentials, but so historically they haven't. So
Right.
there's far more influence of fraud, I think, on the trucking side. On the railroad side, because there are a smaller number of entities, because we have this UIIA agreement where
Mm-hmm.
we actually have a driver database. It's a little less
Oh,
likely that we'll have fraud. It's more likely that we'll have theft.
okay.
And we talked about, on these long stretches of in the desert, for example, it's
Where the bandits come with the
where the
horses,
bandits
right?
come,
Yeah.
that is vulnerable, but really where they seem to be are in big city centers like Los Angeles,
Yep.
Chicago, Memphis. And that's where they go into these intermodal yards. And God bless it,
And they stop, right?
they stop. And so what happens is, even if you've got the highest fence in the world and you've got things that you think can't be broken down, they get bolt cutters, or they somehow get through the fence. These criminals are unbelievable. And they jump over and they just start opening up the containers and taking out a bunch of stuff. And I said one of my
I found about bolt cutters in my high school and college years, and we won't go into that, but it is amazing what they can cut through. We'll just put it that way.
Patrick, I would like to know more about this.
The bigger the bolt cutter, the more leverage you have. And if you see the ones that look like they'd be out of a cartoon, that just means they can cut through a lot thicker metal
Where
because
did
you can crank that down and you can get them anywhere.
when did you use them, Patrick?
So a friend in college needed to get into a storage thing and did not want to pay it. And yeah, I bought a case of beer to go along with this, and I invested the $25 for the bolt cutters, and it was my favorite and only tool I had for a long time. They were heavy enough to use as hammer, and they would cut through just about anything. I only used it for that one to get him, I think, like his computer out of storage, but then I may have done it to get into a closed part of the college that may or not have been haunted on Halloween, which was much more for fun than anything illegal. And but that it made it really spooky when you have to break into the place that may or may not be haunted and closed since
Yeah.
tuberculosis raged.
Oh my God. They probably still had some tuberculosis DNA around there. Do you still have those bolt cutters?
They are in the garage. They are still there. They are to this day my favorite tool. So I'll just tell you from an effective standpoint, bolt
They're
cutters are
effective.
awesome.
They're effective.
How they're used, I will not speak to.
Yeah, very effective. So this has been a journey down memory lane, which if we weren't on a podcast, I'd ask you like 15 more questions about this. But
Please don't, because I have this innate ability of answering even though I shouldn't. So
I'm going to go out and get bolt cutters. You know
yeah,
what? sponsor for this podcast, bolt cutters.
Yeah,
Brought to you by the
just
bolt cutter
the
industry.
generic tool itself. No, and so and you make it, but you made a great point is that and I think through history most people find this, if a person is determined enough, regardless of what you put in place from a catch-all, it's rare that you can stop that person.
Well, and it's so
yeah,
lucrative. There was a video I saw where they were interviewing one of these cargo thieves, and he said
yeah.
he could average 25,000 a week because what he does is he
Oh,
get these consumer electronics, for example, or other, consumer goods, and he resells them on some website, which
right.
I'm sure we could name, but we don't want to get in trouble. And
Now we're worried about getting in trouble, not the bolt
yeah,
cutters that Patrick
yeah,
had.
the
No.
bolt cutters. I don't know who makes them, so we're not in trouble.
No, you're good. So they sell them somewhere, and that's a crazy amount of money. Does that mean we're knocking over, dozens of trucks a day, or is this just they're selecting specific targets to get the high
Yeah.
value?
Well, that to me is concerning because they do seem to know more often than not which containers have the high value goods.
Mm,
So, what some shippers are doing, the beneficial cargo owners are putting, for example, sensors on the doors. And
okay.
so, if you have software that detects that door is opened, you could potentially, if given enough time, apparently it takes 30 minutes for most of the typical sort of ransacking of a train. If you can get there before 30 minutes is out, you have a chance of stopping it in progress. And so that to me is, that's not necessarily prevention, but it is detection.
Right.
And what the 3PL helps us out with is positioning the container so it gets delivered and then picked up in a short amount of time so it's not unattended for any length of time in the yard. And so there are some kind of best practices that we can do to sort of prevent and detect
Hmm.
kind of thievery, but until it's enforced more than it is, which unfortunately there are states that differ in their approach to enforcement, as you know, and there aren't a lot of resources necessarily for property crimes and at the state and local level as there are maybe at
Yeah.
the federal level. They don't necessarily tabulate it all and say, this is $250,000. They think, well, this
Right.
is one train that was $1,000 loss. So we're not going to get involved, right? So there is legislation that would try to make it easier to prosecute for these crimes.
And is that something that yourself and IANA is advocating for, or is that and within that, is it strange that it's not more at a federal level, considering that all of this transportation is changing through state and state? Is it weird that you would expect the state to do something on an entity that's going across state lines back and forth, or is that fairly standard?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really you just want to have a partnership. So, the first line of defense typically is your local and state police. They're the ones
Okay.
who get called first. And if it's big enough, that's when they bring in the feds. And as you said early on, 130 years ago or whatever, when we had Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and whomever else robbing trains, there is there is a
Well, I mean, even then they used Pinkertons. They were outsourcing security then.
there that's right, they were. So the point there is though that it is a federal crime to steal
Okay.
from a train. It
Yeah.
is. But it's just a question of can you get the resources marshaled in order to actually prosecute these people? And unfortunately, one of the things that we've seen too is that some of these folks do get arrested and then they're released shortly afterwards, not held, and then they come back again and do it again. And so again, that's sort of different jurisdictions have different approaches to prosecuting criminals. One would hope that we can have a more uniform approach to prosecuting theft. Let's just be hopeful.
Yeah, no, and I'm okay with being hopeful, and within that, and talking back to the advocacy and a little bit of the perception, what's the biggest uphill battle that you and IANA have with what your goal is for people to be more aware and be more utilize more of the intermodal ecosystem? I'm sure there's perception, but what are the strong perceptions you're fighting against? And other than maybe like you just discussed, some better consequences and marshaling and execution of anti-theft or fraud. what else are you advocating for that will get you to where you think IANA and the intermodal world should be to kind of catch up with modern times? Not that you guys are in the Stone Ages by any means, but just inherently as a person who isn't involved with your group and thinks of trains, it's hard because they've been around for so long. It's hard not to think that it's yesterday's technology.
Sure. And I 100% agree with you. And I think that that is certainly a hill we have to climb. I will say this though, the excess capacity in the marketplace in terms of trucking and otherwise is challenging because
Mm-hmm.
if you have a competitor who can really sell a service for a reasonable fee, and then there's a lot of that, it's very hard to then say, well, we're better somehow. And so
Mm.
we know this, the volumes are not coming in. They were great up until I think we had fabulous numbers in March.
Mm-hmm.
Now we all know what's happening in the economy, but even that, we've been this long freight recession, and I'm sure
Yeah.
that you are feeling it as well. And
Yep.
so that means that it's even harder to get converts because people are just watching every nickel and dime, right?
Mm. So it doesn't matter all of these additional value adds or or yeah, but it's really I looked at this number and it's lower than your number, and that's the only thing I'm looking at right now.
Well, and right. And so I think you know, we all lived through the heady times of the pandemic where people would pay anything for the service. Now they're like, no. I mean,
Yeah.
right? So the shipper has the leverage now. And so even if you say, but these are the add-ons, you're going to know who you're doing business with. You don't have to worry about fraud. I mean, and this is the same for the truckload folk on the 3PL side. You know who you're business with. We've got everyone vetted. We have carrier vetting solutions. You know, we know we can track them and trace them and all that stuff. If they're like, I don't, this is too much. I don't want to pay for it. What do you do?
Right. No, and I mean within that, is that something that more and more you think we'll see people just, I don't want to say lowballing, but just buying on the price and not the over? Because logistics, as you and I both know, is so relationship based. But it sounds like either we have a new pool of shippers or buyers, or the trend has just kind of changed of, yeah, I know you've helped me for 30 years, but I got to make these numbers match up, or it doesn't make sense, even
Yeah.
though you've been our guy. Where is that going? And is intermodal have anything different within to offer than just straight, LTL or full truckload?
Yeah. I mean, Patrick, that is the $50 billion question, right?
Well, that's why I
Because
asked it. If I answered it, I wouldn't be hosting a podcast. I'd be the guy in the back. I'd be the guy looking like the old oil barons that used to run the trains,
yeah,
just with my
exactly.
oiled up mustache and a top hat up to here, and I'm sure a cigar that puts me
That's
in the
on
grave at
on a
45.
big
Yeah.
stick, yeah. Um, I wish that for you, but
Where did
I
you want to be when you grow up? Oil baron? Yeah,
I wanna
no.
be an oil baron,
Yeah.
obviously.
That's so
Um,
hard to ask.
I would say this, I think if you get burned by a negative experience of doing business at a cut rate, but that should help change your mind. And, um, what we can promise and what we can deliver is a service again that where you're utilizing every mode in the most optimal way, and you don't need to know the details. We've got it covered, right?
Right.
So my sense of it is this is not going to be the best time necessarily, but again, because of this advent of fraud, because of this advent of cargo theft, knowing who you're doing business with, relying on reasonable and reliable partners is critical. And
Yeah.
what happens is, because we saw this too, if the marketplace goes down, there's going to be even more theft and
Hmm.
right. And
Correct.
so that to me is all
Because you're
right. Well,
putting less of investment into security, you're putting less of investment into verifying and credentialing those that are moving your things. You're just saying, yeah, this dude said he'll move it for 5. I don't care who or what he is. Let's go.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so to me, that's where you say, this is how we differentiate ourselves.
Hmm. And so what you said is interesting. You said, "Hey, this might not be the time for that," but it sounds like it's the perfect time for IANA to double down and really let people know, or
Yeah.
internally, guys, what do we need to change so we're even more of a better alternative, or we're the best option?
Yeah.
What are you and IANA, like you said, you've had some roundtables on a few different topics. What's what's the immediate mission right now? What's the next step? I get the big picture. What are you driving at right now to get to that big picture and big goal?
Yeah, I kind of want to ask you a question too. So I'll
Okay.
answer your question, then I'm going to ask you a question.
Beautiful.
The big picture is we have to get more engaged on advocacy. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, we're going to, with the board approval, we'll open up a DC satellite office space. We'll, again, with board approval, we would want to hire a government affairs professional to really get us up and get going on what are, who we are, what we would like.
And that seems pretty standard,
Yeah, it seems pretty standard, and so we don't have that muscle memory yet.
right?
We'll get there, and so that's sort of the immediate.
They've got you in 18 years. Come on,
They got me in
eight
18.
of, but within the didn't you say 18 years in the
Oh,
government?
sorry. Yes, yeah. 18 months in the government.
18 months. That makes a lot more sense because I heard the 18 years. I'm like, man, you really stuck it out before you realized that wasn't for you. No.
No. But here's my question to you. So,
Yeah.
and so then, and the PR campaign again, which is just sort of this awareness campaign, getting
Yeah.
to who Intermodal is. But let's just say you're in a focus group and people are asking you your opinions about intermodal. What do you think would be appealing to you? Knowing just the little you know now about the intermodal industry, what messaging would appeal to you as you think about, freight and movement and all that stuff?
So I'll go two ways I'll answer this. First, as Patrick on the street, not in the logistics industry. If you can tell me there will be less trucks in front of me on the highway that I have to pass because it's on a train, I love it.
Yeah.
From the logistics standpoint, I'm already a guy that does TMS. So you basically talk to me of it's the best option when it's the best option. Like, sure, if I'm going to, apartment building, I can't hope that a train track's going to be built there all of a sudden. But if I'm using one of these existing you almost go the Superman route, right? It's Americana. It's the train. It worked good enough to get us through the gold rush. It be good enough to get us through 2025.
Yeah.
Almost this, hey, as long as America has been America, the tracks have been up and running. Go with it that way. Because that's what I would think. That's the kind of messaging. It's a little too emotional maybe for someone on a ROI side, but it might be that's kind of where I'd see it because I'd buy into that.
Yeah.
The
I like
trains haven't
that.
stopped. I live in a city where if I don't take one of three ways out, I will get stopped by a train. So a train is a part of every day of my life, and I see that going. I don't see ports because here on Lake Erie, there's not a whole lot coming in outside. Outside of what back in the you have to go back probably 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
Other than like the one or two that go through. But yeah, it's tough because if you're not someone that's doing the shipping or the buying, do you really care? So how do you talk to the general population about it? You talk about it as trains is a significant part of this country's foundation and then its future, as well as, hey, if we put it on a train, that's one less truck you got to pass or is blocking the road going the same speed as the other truck in the other lane where you're going, please God, I've been here for 20 minutes and I just want to get around one of you. So
I like that. I mean, there's no wrong answer. It's sort of like, all right, what are the messages that would be the most appealing?
right.
That would be sort of like, oh, I get it. Like, I said the 436 per gallon. That's instantly you get it, right?
Right.
Instantly you get, okay, well, that there's environmental benefits. So I get it. And so just thinking of what is it that tells the story quickly enough so you're not
Right. Because you only
or-
have you don't even have 30 seconds anymore.
right.
You got 15
At
tops.
15 tops. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So how do you get that messaging out? And that's a great question. And I think that'll be something that once you conquer that, I mean, yeah, you're gold, right?
Yeah.
But I think the sustainability, even though maybe the current
Yeah.
regime and where people are isn't the top of it, I think that it has to maintain its relevance as a claim because it's probably It sounds like it's one of the bigger strengths of just a apples to apples comparison.
Yeah, I think that's right. And your point is a good one, which is I think most people don't want it shoved down their throats,
Mm-hmm.
but they do feel better when something is environmentally friendly, right? So
Right.
it's like I care about it. If I can make a decision that's not going to kill me, then
You
yeah,
mean
I would
you mean
choose.
I can get all my Amazon packages on one day and it's just gonna make it so I don't
Yeah,
have to in one box and I can
yeah,
as long as you don't
yeah.
slow it down and that's perfect. So you're right. It's a weird balancing. Like, yeah, I really care about that, but not enough to wait another 2 days to get that box. So
A
like,
100%, right? And so yeah, so how do you straddle that? I mean, I do think it should still be part of the story because it is compelling to your point. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of opportunity. To me, there's a lot of opportunity. The awareness component of it just expands our reach and our ability to make those converts. And so that's why I'm here
uh-huh.
and I'm young enough that I can be here for a while.
I I like it. And so with that, you're here and you'll be there for a while. We know the big picture and kind of that next step. Give me a kind of I always like to ask. I think I asked you this back in the TIA days. 5 years, where's IANA going to be under your helm?
Yeah, well, we're going to have 10% of the market share. I'm
There
kidding.
you go. Boom. Write it down.
We're going to double our market share.
We're bringing back Thomas the Train Engine.
No, I think in all seriousness, if we can move the numbers up on market share, I will have felt like, we have done something that we have been successful. And
Yeah.
and there's just a lot of tools in that toolkit. It's not just one different, it's not just the PR campaign. It's not just advocacy. It's also education. It's also providing a thought leadership. And so this all takes time to build, but I think we're getting there. One of the things that we have is data on our intermodal volumes and international versus domestic and then by region. And
Yeah.
that's important information. How can we harness that data and how can we even get more of it? How can we tap into that data? I mean, you guys deal with data every single day and using AI to look at patterns and
Mhm.
strengths and developing the best way for your customers to move their goods, right? I mean, that to me is, I think, a future strength that we can harness. And it's just a question of how we do it.
Yeah. No, that's very, very smart answer there. And I think that it's unless something drastically changes from now in 5 years, it like you said, that market share up and then really just getting to the point of where the data, what you see from the data, you're utilizing to get you to that next point. And I think that's what everybody is doing, but it's just shifting of what that point and what's important to them to find out from that data is.
Yeah.
Um, so I've got two things here, and we'll end it because I know nobody likes to talk to me this long. My wife even puts me off to the side for a bit. But so first question, who's the celebrity?
I don't know why I thought of him first, but I thought of Brad Pitt.
All right. All right. I like it. Now you're going like how do you how is he just chilling at his home? He's like, hey, have you guys thought about intermodal
No,
lately? You
he's
got him.
he's standing next to a container and he's sort of casually got his elbow
Yeah.
out there leaning against the container and he's looking out on the port and he sees it coming in and then he sees where it goes and he follows it, right? Do
I
you see
like it.
it? Do you
Now,
vision? Do you have the
what
vision?
Brad Pitt is this? Is this Moneyball Brad Pitt? Is this Fight
No.
Club Brad Pitt? What are we talking here?
What was that movie? Not Legends of the Fall, the other one where uh, a river runs through it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got that. No,
Huh?
I can see that. I like that. It's a good visual.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. I like
Okay.
that. Not
Yeah.
at all. You're right. I'm glad I asked the question because I had no idea where it was gonna go. And that's always the most fun. But I like that answer. I like
Thanks.
that. It's very
I'm
nice.
sure he's real cost effective to get on board.
He's gotta have to donate time and stuff for write-offs too, right? Yeah.
It's a write-off.
That's right. Exactly.
You remember that? It's a write-off.
I did, exactly. I love that. I think there was a show I watched recently where they just said it's a write-off. Don't worry about it. And they're
Yeah.
just like, what do you mean? I don't think you know what this means. All of that money has to be paid. None of that works.
It's like we'll fix it in post.
Yes. Yes, that's exactly it. Don't worry about it. I tell that to my producer all of the time. He's probably going to have an aneurysm within a few weeks here. But so as we're finishing up, and always a pleasure to have you on. And as your CEO and president of IANA, as whether this is at Anne Reinke or as the president of IANA, what's your last message, or what's your, here's your soapbox moment? What do you got for us?
Gosh, I just think that a powerful American economy helps a freight economy as well. And so if we can make sure we have a powerful domestic American economy, then yes, freight will all benefit and intermodal will be part of that.
I like that. And one more, if I want to know more about IANA or what you're doing, where do I go? How do I find that out?
Yeah, go to intermodal.org. It's
Oh,
replete. There's a vocabulary word.
I was
It's
gonna say,
replete with information.
I love that use of the word. My wife tells me I talk like I'm from the 1940s, so I will probably use that and mess with her head later today. So thank you very much. No, and always a pleasure. Thank you so much for the time. And everybody watching, thank you for listening, watching. Make sure to engage, subscribe, whatever it is that people tell you to do at the end of YouTube videos. But thanks to everybody for being here, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.
Patrick.